Hi guys, Namaste everyone. I hope that till now you have understood what is this video about and what are we going to do in this video. And before we start this video, I just want to say that just surrender yourself and to the lotus feet of the Lord and just surrender, just leave everything to God and just do that. That is all that we need to do while reading or listening Bhagavad Gita or your holy scripture. Just what is required of you is just surrendering, just surrender with love that he is everything, and he is the supreme controller, and he has uh, the control over our lives and our emotions. And since he knows how and we are going to feel, and he knows that when to produce certain kind of emotions, if you are feeling very very heavy, your heart is heavy because of some other thing, or because of that particular situation, you are here listening to Bhagavad Gita, just remember that you need to surrender, and he will handle everything. He gave you that emotion, so he knows what he has to give you other than that emotion to make you come out of that place of whatever you're going through. Even if it's anger, sadness, depression, he knows what he has to give you. He just leave it up to him, and just remember him. Remember that he's sitting by your side, he's listening to you, and just talk to him. Just go sit in your temple. I am sitting in my home's drawing room. You could sit in your temple, or you could go to some temple and listen to this. Just sit somewhere where you are not disturbed, and just listen to this. And with everything, even with the music that I have played behind, you could listen. It's so that even if your mind is distracted, when his name is coming or entering your ears, you remember him again, and that distraction goes away time by time, because it takes time to have complete focus on God. Sometimes you're distracted because of all the worldly affairs and all the noises around, all the visuals around. So just that's why I play this music, even for me, because even sometimes I get distracted. So when I get distracted, I hear the music, and it reminds me again that I'm remembering God, and this is my time just to devote to God. So we were on page number 6 of Bhagavad Gita, and we had just started out on understanding what Bhagavad Gita is. So we will be continuing with that. So we were on the second para of this page. If you have opened your own Bhagavad Gita with me and you were reading with me, otherwise those who were listening, let's start. Out of so many human beings who are suffering, there are a few who are actually inquiring about their position, as to what they are, why they are put into this awkward position, and so on. That is you, who has come here and who is searching for the answer to this. Unless one is awakened to this position of questioning his suffering, unless he realizes that he doesn't want suffering but rather wants to make a solution to all suffering, then one is not to be considered a perfect human being. Humanity begins with this sort of inquiry. When this sort of inquiry is awakened in one's mind, in the Brahma Sutra, this inquiry is called Brahma Jigyasa, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Every activity of the human being is to be considered a failure unless he inquires about the nature of the Absolute. Therefore, those who begin to question why they are suffering, or where they came from and where they shall go after death, are proper students for understanding Bhagavad Gita. The sincere student should also have a firm respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a student was Arjuna. Lord Krishna descends specifically to re-establish the real purpose of life when man forgets the purpose. Even then, out of many, many human beings who awaken, there may be one who actually enters the spirit of understanding his position, and for him, this Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Actually, we are all swallowed by the tigress of nescience. But the Lord is very merciful upon living entities, especially human beings. To this end, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, making his friend Arjuna his student. Being an associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna was above all ignorance. But Arjuna was put into ignorance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to question Lord Krishna about the problems of life, and so that Lord could explain them for the benefit of future generation of human beings and chalk out the plan of life. Then man could act accordingly and perfect the mission of human life. The subject of Bhagavad Gita entails the comprehension of five basic truths. First of all, the science of God is explained, and then the constitutional position of the living entities, jivas. There is Ishvara, which means the controller, and there are jivas, the living entities which are controlled. If a living entity says that he is not controlled but that he is free, then he is insane. The living being is controlled in every respect, at least in this conditioned life. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter deals with the Ishvara, the supreme controller, and the Jivas, the controlled living entities. Prakriti, that is material nature, and time, the duration of existence of the whole universe or the manifestation of material nature, and karma, that is activity, are also discussed. The cosmic manifestation is full of different activities. All living entities are engaged in different activities. From Bhagavad Gita, we must learn what God is, what the living entities are, and what Prakriti is, what the cosmic manifestation is, how it is controlled by time, and what the activities of the living entities are. Out of these five basic subject matters in Bhagavad Gita, it is established that Supreme Godhead or Krishna or Brahman or the Supreme Controller or Paramatma, you may use whatever name you like, is the greatest of all. The living beings are in quality like the Supreme Controller. The living beings are in quality like the Supreme Controller. For instance, the Lord has control over the universal affairs of material nature, as will be explained in the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Material nature is not independent. She is acting under the directions of the Supreme Lord. As Lord Krishna says, Maya Dhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sa Charam. This material nature is working under my direction. When we see wonderful things happening in the cosmic nature, we should know that behind this cosmic manifestation there is a controller. Nothing could be manifested without being controlled. It is childish not to consider the controller. For instance, a child may think that an automobile is quite wonderful to be able to run without a horse or other animal pulling it. But a sane man knows the nature of automobile's engineering arrangement. He always knows that behind the machinery there is a man, a driver. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the driver under whose direction everything is working. Now the jivas or the living entities have been accepted by the Lord, as we will note in the later chapters, as his parts and parcels. A particle of gold is also gold. A drop of water from the ocean is also salty. And similarly, we, the living entities, being a part and parcel of the Supreme Controller, Ishvara or Bhagwan, Lord Shri Krishna, have all the qualities of the Supreme Lord in minute quantity, because we are minute Ishvaras, subordinate Ishvaras. We are trying to control nature, as presently we are trying to control space or planets, and this tendency to control is there because it is in Krishna. But although we have a tendency to lord it over material nature, we should also know that we are not the Supreme Controller. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, what is material nature? This is also explained in the Gita as inferior Prakriti, inferior nature. The living entity is explained as the superior Prakriti. Prakriti is always under control, whether inferior or superior. Prakriti is female and she is controlled by the Lord, just as the activities of a wife are controlled by the husband. Prakriti is always subordinate, predominated by the Lord, who is the predominator. The living entities and material nature are both predominated, controlled by the Supreme Lord. According to the Gita, the living entities, although parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are to be considered Prakriti. This is clearly mentioned in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Aparayam itastva anyamam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam. This material nature is my inferior Prakriti, but beyond this is another Prakriti, Jiva Bhutam, the living entities. Material nature itself is constituted by three qualities: the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Above these modes there is eternal time, and by a combination of these modes of nature and under the control and purview of eternal time, there are activities which are called karma. These activities are being carried out from time immemorial, and we are suffering or enjoying the fruits of our activities. For instance, suppose I am a businessman and have worked very hard with intelligence and have amassed a great bank balance. Then I am an enjoyer. But then say I have lost all my money in business, then I am a sufferer. Similarly, in every field of life, we enjoy the results of our work or we suffer the results. This is called karma. Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Jiva, the living entity, Prakriti, nature, Kal, eternal time, and Karma, that is activity, are all explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Out of these five, the Lord, the living entities, material nature, and time are eternal. The manifestation of Prakriti may be temporary, but it is not false. Some philosophers say that the manifestation of material nature is false, but according to the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita or according to the philosophy of Vaishnavas, this is not so. The manifestation of the world is not accepted as false, it is accepted as real, but temporary. It is likened unto a cloud which moves across the sky, or the coming of the rainy season which nourishes grains. As soon as the rainy season is over and as soon as the cloud goes away, all the crops which were nourished by the rain dry up. Similarly, this material manifestation takes place at a certain interval, stays for a while and then disappears. Such are the workings of Prakriti. But this cycle is working eternally. Therefore, Prakriti is eternal, it is not false. The Lord refers to this as my Prakriti. This material nature is the separated energy of the Supreme Lord, and similarly, the living entities are also the energy of the Supreme Lord, although they are not separated but eternally related. So, the Lord, the living entity, material nature, and time are all interrelated and are all eternal. However, the other item, karma, is not eternal. The effects of karma may be very old indeed. We are suffering or enjoying the results of our activities from time immemorial, but we can change the results of our karma or our activity, and this change depends on the perfection of our knowledge. We are engaged in various activities. Undoubtedly, we do not know what sort of activities we should adapt to gain relief from the actions and reactions of all these activities. But this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The position of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is that of supreme consciousness. The jivas or the living entities, being parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also conscious. Both the living entity and material nature are explained as Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord, but one of the two, the jiva, is conscious. The other Prakriti is not conscious, that is the difference. Therefore, the jiva Prakriti is called superior because the jiva has consciousness which is similar to Lord's. The Lord's is supreme consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. The living being cannot be supremely conscious at any stage of his perfection, and the theory that he can be so is a misleading theory. Conscious he may be, but he is not perfectly or supremely conscious. The distinction between the jiva and the Ishvara will be explained in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord is Kshetra Gyan, conscious, as is the living being, but the living being is conscious of his particular body, whereas the Lord is conscious of all bodies. Because he lives in the heart of every living entity, he is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. We should not forget this. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. The living entity forgets what to do. First of all, he makes a determination to act in a certain way, and then he is entangled in the actions and reactions of his own karma. After giving up one type of body, he enters another type of body as we take off and put on clothes. As the soul thus migrates, he suffers the actions and reactions of his past activities. These activities can be changed when the living being is in the mode of goodness, insanity, and understands what sort of activities he should adopt. If he does so, then all the actions and reactions of his past activities are changed. Consequently, karma is not eternal. Therefore, We stated that of the 5 items, that is Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, time and karma, 4 are eternal, whereas karma is not eternal. The supreme conscious Ishvara is similar to the living entity in this way. Both the consciousness of the Lord and that of the living entity are transcendental. It is not that consciousness is generated by the association of matter. That is a mistaken idea. The theory that consciousness develops under certain circumstances of material combination is not accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. Consciousness may be perversely reflected by the covering of the material circumstances. Just as light reflected through the colored glass may appear to be a certain color, but the consciousness of the Lord is not materially affected. Lord Krishna says, Maya Dhyakshena Prakriti. When he descends into the material universe, his consciousness is not materially affected. If he were so affected, he would be unfit to speak on transcendental matters as he does in the Bhagavad Gita. One cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from materially contaminated consciousness. So the Lord is not materially contaminated. Our consciousness at the present moment, however, is materially contaminated. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that we have to purify this materially contaminated consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be devoted to the will of the Ishvara, and that will make us happy. It is not that we have to cease all activities, rather, our activities are to be purified, and purified activities are called bhakti. Activities in bhakti appear to be like ordinary activities, but they are not contaminated. An ignorant person may see that a devotee is acting or working like an ordinary man. But such a person with a poor fund of knowledge does not know that the activities of the devotee or of the Lord are not contaminated by impure consciousness or matter. They are transcendental to the 3 modes of nature. We should know, however, that at this point our consciousness is contaminated. Hare Krishna. So we will be reading it till here today. I just, while reading today's uh, matter, I just remembered a line. I was telling, if that you are here for a reason. Maybe you are here because God has called you to listen Bhagavad Gita. We never do it by ourselves. You cannot even enter a temple unless God wants you to enter. You might miss that chance of even entering. And even listening to God's name or even reciting God's name is if He wishes for us to do so. So you are here because God wants you to be here. And I just heard a line by someone. I used to be a little bit sad. Everybody has sad times or sad phases in their lives, and after my grandfather's demise or after he passed away, I remember I was really really sad, and I used to listen to some guru's podcast or something like that related to Bhagavad Gita or related to Krishna, and he said that God lives where? He lives in your heart. And your heart is the house of all your emotions. So when God lives with your emotions, how can he not know what you're going through? So when you enter a temple and you start saying that aapko pata, like, do you know what I'm going through or things like that, I think you must just remember that you don't even have to express that. You just have to look at God and talk through your eyes sometimes. Sometimes you don't even need to speak because He lives there with everything that you're feeling. He lives in your heart. So He knows everything. You don't even need to ask Him for anything. He will give you. You just need to look at Him and, feel His presence around you and remember Him. Just how I don't know, just how Draupadi did. If you have some information about the Mahabharata, just how Draupadi remembered Lord Krishna as her friend uh, during the Chirharan, and you just need to remember with a pure heart and just remember him that just tell him that I'm remembering you. Just remember his face, just remember his eyes, just remember him, and he will be there. As soon as you remember him, he is there. Doesn't even take time to come. He is just there with you. So I think that's why um, you are also here listening to Bhagavad Gita because he is calling you, and it's his wish that you must listen to it. uh, yeah, I think that's all for today, and I hope you're feeling better and everything will be okay. Just surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord, and if you want to read more, you can read on your own. um, nobody's stopping you. You don't have to restrict to my timeline. And if you want to do your jap and just recite God's name on the jap mala, whether it is a tulsi mala, I use a tulsi mala, and you could use a rudraksh mala, anything. You could recite the name of Lord Krishna, or Lord Hanuman, or Shivji, anybody that you feel that you have a closer connection to, or you feel more attracted to that. We call it isht, your isht devta, someone you feel more attracted to, and in any form, whether it is as a friend or anything, just recite their name and remember them. And yes, I'll see you tomorrow again. Bye.